Right. Ian, what is the one thing that truly maximizes the value of someone's home when they go to sell their property?
I love this question, and this question is there is a one thing answer which I'll give you, but it's all about the ecosystem of getting a few different components right to maximize the value, and those components are right back to basic marketing principles of getting your price right, your promotion right, and your presentation right. If I had to take all of them away and I could only have one, I would say getting your price right, if that was the one thing I could have amongst everything else. But it is an ecosystem, and that ecosystem is driven by the right agent. The agent has to have everything in balance, I think, to make sure that the seller gets the best price for the home when they come to market.
What happens though if they don't have the price, the presentation, the marketing? What happens? Why? It's the consequence of not getting those things right.
So you see this, whenever you look at the Rightmove back office, you see this spike, don't you, when something goes on the market, and you see this immediate spike and this sort of all the attention's on that property. And if you've done all of your pre-marketing right, if you spoke to your buyers on your mailing list right, you have this spike, and that spike is when anyone that you didn't know before comes to look at the property and sees it as well. And if you miss that window, and that window is getting smaller and smaller, by the way, I think it used to be that, if something's not sold after 28 days, you need to have a conversation. But now I think that 2 days into marketing, there's something wrong here. So if you get that wrong and you miss that spike and that wave, that buzz of everyone you've spoken to on your mailing list, of everyone that's seen it on social media, of everyone that you don't know who's coming into the market that's seen it on Rightmove or wherever else, then it starts to sit there. And then once it sits there, it starts to build that connotation of why has that house not sold? And people start to build the narrative about why it's not sold. And then as time goes on, the stats show, don't they, that the longer that time goes on, the less likely it is to sell. And more importantly for the seller, the less likely it is then to go on to exchange and complete. So even if it does go on to sell, the chances of it actually exchanging completing start to drop through the floor. So getting that first section right is absolutely imperative and crucial, I think, to the success of the move or not.
Why do agents get this wrong then? Why do they allow properties to come to market and then it's now been on for 40 days and they're still not under offer? It's then been on for 50 days. If we're saying, or you're saying right now, really within a couple of days, you will know sort of instantly actually whether you've hit the right target or not. So why do agents allow properties to remain, in my view, at 40 days or beyond a month? That now starts to look like it's stagnating. Why do agents do that?
There's probably a combination of things, to be honest with you. And I guess I'm saying this from the point of view that I've made mistakes. I've had those properties that have been on the market longer and it doesn't, we don't have, we're not right 100% of the time and we're only human. But I think that there are agents that, it depends where you are within the industry. So there are agents that are happy to let properties sit on the books and that this sort of loss aversion, I think, we go back to original sort of corporate and bigger agency days, the loss aversion of losing that board, they just want to keep that board for their market share, for the stats. There's agents that sometimes, if it's not it's not marketed right, or they've probably listened to the client, which I think is a mistake that agents make, where they've listened to the client and the client said, well, I know you've said X for it, but I would like Y for it. I want this higher figure for it. And the agents have actually listened to the client instead of listening, it took their own advice.
Why if they know it's wrong to do it, why do they do it?
Because I think we can be guilty of measuring the wrong metrics. I think historically in agency, where you were looking at, it used to be board counts back in the day, didn't it? You used to drive around and count the competitors' boards to see who had what. Then obviously, Rightmove came along and then Rightmove produced the sort of fancy pie charts and back office, and it's all about, get shares. So it's measuring the wrong metrics. I think agents are thinking, well, we've got more instructions, we're the market leader, we've got more than the next person. It's not about that. It's about running your business, and it's about having properties that actually go through to sell. But again, it depends what type of business you are. Again, in the self-employed space, agents can't afford to collect houses. They have to have houses on the market that sell. In the middle ground, and corporate companies might have carry stock, and that's okay. Independents are probably somewhere in the middle. They can carry some stock, but they still need it to sell because obviously they're still in an independent business.
Pricing though, right? You mentioned pricing being one of the things that, if let's say you've got the marketing, you've got the positioning, the photography, you got all of that wrong, but your price was bang on, does it still mean an agent is gonna maximize value?
Not necessarily. It means that it means that they will get, if the house, if market value is £300,000 and the agents put it on the market at £250,000, then they're going to get the interest, they're going to get the people through the door. But I think it sort of goes, maximizing the value sort of goes hand in hand with the agents that are actually doing all the other things as well. Because I think that the agents that are not only getting the price right, but they're getting the marketing right and the presentation right, they're also getting the negotiation right. Because again, it'd be easy to, there's various different ways of looking at offers. For example, if it is market value at 300, it's on at 250, and they just show one person through the door the next morning and accept the offer from that one person, then that's not maximizing value. That's just taking the first order that comes in type thing, really. Whereas the more structured approach, the agent that has done all those things in the sort of build up to the pre-market and then arranges a block viewing or an open day, whatever you want to call it, and gets the best buyers in the market to come look at that house at the same time and creates that social proof and creates that urgency, that's what will then drive the value up and drive the price up for the seller, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, because I think certainly in terms of the first couple of days, so I don't allow any buyer in for 14 days when I've marketed the property. They're just not allowed in. And the reason I do that is because, yes, we all want to make sure that property comes to market, we get it under offer, and everyone like, oh my God, this is so exciting. But equally at the same time, I want to make sure that I'm controlling the market for my seller. So I want all 3 waves of buyers in. The first wave, the agent already knows that hot's a trot, that missing out another property. The second wave that the agent doesn't know, but the second wave of just sort of browsing online, may have made a few inquiries, but not left their details, may have actually gone out to see a couple of properties, but sort of like cutting their teeth in and around actually what is the real money, what's not. And then the tire kickers, which are the third wave. And we always need rent a crowd to come to the property, right? To create.
Yeah, you need a few extras, on the open day.
Right, we're extras. I think extras is a quite a cool word as well, right? So definitely, but I just find it really strange that when you're talking the way that you're talking, which is very open and very honest about like those ingredients that have to be in place, and then also following it up with that if you had to choose one thing, it would be the price. That is what agents do though, right? They promise that big price, which is not evidence based. But why? Why would they do that? If they're looking to be employed by another human being, what is it that compels them to say fictitious money?
This varies with often how the agent is incentivized. I believe in sort of corporate companies, there are some agents that are incentivized by listings, so just what you get on the market. So therefore, the more sets of keys you come back with at the end of each day, the more your salary is, rather than on sales. There's an element of, I think, probably self-confidence amongst agents. I think when you sit, it's hard when you sat in somebody's lounge and you give your price and they say, but the person before you said £100,000 more, or the person before you said £50,000 more, or I thought it was going to be X price. There's a confidence thing there, and I think probably a training thing to be able to deal with that and advise them and give the reasons why your price is your price. Again, the model for many, many years was that, you priced it, you put it on the market for a bit more than you thought it was worth, and everyone looked for a bit higher on Rightmove than they thought they were going to, and then people chipped down a bit. That was always how it sort of operated. So the people that haven't moved for a long time are still having those conversations. If you say house is worth £500,000, they're saying, great, well, let's put it up at 550 then, and we've got a bit of room for manoeuvre. Whereas now that just doesn't work. It's sort of the opposite. There's confidence in the agent to be able to sort of advise the clients that that's not how it works. That plays a part in it. There's agents that are incentivized not by selling, but by putting them on the market. So there's various factors, I think, really.
So it actually then comes down to, is what we're saying, comes down to business model. Is what is the business model of that agency? And I think that's where, and tell me what your thoughts are on this, but that's where I think a lot of sellers go wrong, because they look at agents as agents all being the same. And as you and I both know, and the reason I'm asking you on this podcast, because I know there are levels within levels. And just because you're all sort of like got the same title as estate agent, that don't mean the business model of the estate agency is the same. But then what sellers tend to do, which I think is one of the biggest mistakes they make, they see the length of time on market, i.e. the longer it's on the market for, as some sort of bargaining chip and some sort of like position of power that, oh, I'm not in a rush. What's your view on that?
Is literally the worst phrase that you want to hear. Either I'm not in a rush or I don't need to sell it. They are the worst things you can hear from a seller. And there is this sort of misguided notion of sellers that, like you say, I'll wait for the right buyer to come along. And you know what? Occasionally you've seen it where, somebody pops up out of the blue, out of the woodwork and, this is my dream home. But that's not the norm, and that's not what you can sort of hang your hat on. So yeah, there are sellers that believe that they'll sit it out and wait. But in reality, like we've said, the houses start to draw the connotations. The people who are in the market, the serious buyers who are in the market, have seen it and are asking questions about it. And it works the other way for buyers, doesn't it? Sellers leave it on the market for longer thinking the right buyer will come along, and buyers watch it on the market for longer thinking the amount I'm going to chip them is getting bigger and bigger. So they're sort of both moving in opposite directions, aren't they?
Yeah. And I mean, so Christopher Watkins says a lot that buyers have been on the market longer than you have. So it's not like the buyers have only just arrived because you've gone on the market. Look at all the other competition that is on the market right now, about to come to market next week on your road or before. That before element, those buyers have been looking, they've been around, they understand what the pounds per square footage is, because not very skilled agents, and maybe the business model as well, which is try and get as many instructions as you possibly can, throw enough shit at the wall and some of it will stick. And then those agents, those negotiators are trying to get deals done. So they're telling buyers what the real money is. And then buyers, of course, when another property comes to market that is on the market for too much money, length of time doesn't equate to value. Length of time normally equates to you're taking the piss, unless it's a very, very, maybe it's a 1.5 or a 1.7 million pound property in an area where traditionally £300,000 houses are being sold. Then I would allow a property at that level and the distance between the average and something else to be a bit longer personally. But otherwise, yeah, it's just strange to me. Yeah, just strange. I mean, your approach though, right? And your business, what do you believe that agents consistently get wrong, and what do you do differently?
I think one of the things that agents get wrong is the launch of a property. I think that when you look at the likes of Rightmove, Zoopla, I think agents will just drop a property onto Rightmove and then react once it's dropped onto Rightmove. And I think that there's so much missing when agents just drop it in on Rightmove. And yeah, Rightmove does its thing and alerts people, and you've probably got your CRM, which emails everybody your CRM. But it just effectively, I see some properties, it almost feels like they just sneak onto Rightmove, and then you just notice them. Even I would notice them a few days later, think, oh no way, that's next road over from me. No way is that on the market, and I look at Rightmove every day. So I think they just get wrong in terms of just sneaking properties onto Rightmove. Whereas I think that the launch strategy, and you mentioned it in terms of that you don't allow people in for that sort of initial period when something's on the market. But I think it starts before that, and it certainly does with us and our agents, that in the build-up to something coming on the market, if something's coming on the market, say 1st of December, then your social media pre-launch is starting mid-November. And during that social media pre-launch, you've got your sort of coming soon, your videos, your sort of sneak peeks of the house. You've got you speaking to your best buyers on your mailing list to say, look, I've got a property that's coming up. It's banging the price range that you're looking at. Are you in the market? Are you free to view on? We're going to have a viewing weekend on this weekend. And it's going to come to the market. Plus, you've got sort of emails going out as well as, WhatsApp messages. So basically, you're warming the market up for something that isn't going to sneak on the market. You're warming it up for this property to come on the market, for people to think, oh, no way, that's that house. I've seen about this on social media. I've heard about this, or John's called me about this last week. So then by the time it's on the market, it's live on the open market, people are anticipating and expecting it. And then, like you say, you've then got that next wave of people who are browsing, who you didn't know and you've not spoken to. And those combinations of people, then when you do have your viewing day, that's when it's listing, it's launching it with impact. So I think that's where agents get wrong. It's just, put it on Rightmove on a Friday afternoon because the client said they want it on for the weekend, rather than building anticipation and speaking to the people who are ready to buy it and say, look, it's coming on the market. As you do, you can't see it yet, but let me tell you it's coming on the market. Let me tell you it ticks all of the boxes for everything you've told me you want. The viewing day is going to be this day, make sure you're free because there's going to be people interested. So I think that launch strategy is something that agents get wrong, that we've put quite a lot of time and effort into thinking, how can we maximize the launch of a property?
Because when I would argue, when someone's about to launch their property to market, I would argue it's bigger than their wedding. True though, right? You think about your wedding, how important your wedding is. And it's really strange to me because a lot of sellers, the vast majority of sellers, when they're organizing their weddings, they are going to hold their wedding planner so accountable. It's unreal. They are going to make sure that there is not a stone that's been left unturned. And yet, when it comes to their biggest tax-free asset, as Stephen Brown likes to say, right?
Yeah. I love that actually, because the wedding, you're literally talking like hour by hour, aren't you? You know, you're literally like, right, at this hour, this is going to happen. And then in the next half an hour, this is going to happen. Then music starts at this time. So I think it's a great analogy.
But before then, before the actual main event, the dress rehearsal. The dress rehearsal of going, right, so what milestones do we need to hit? And that event manager, right, they are not playing any games as an event manager for that wedding. They are saying, I need your deposit of £2,500 to be paid by this time. I need to make sure that that's done by this time over here. I'm now taking you on a journey because this is the photographer you're going to use based upon what you told me about the sort of photography that you... And so, you know, having all these huge cogs being turned. And to your point, when a property comes to market, well, the seller wants it on for the weekend, so we're going to put it on Friday. No, I don't do that in between bit that you do. Maybe I should start doing it, right? But my first couple of weeks is making sure the full contract package is good to go before we launch. Making sure that all the marketing in terms of my copywriting, in terms of the photographs, is all signed off by my client, because I view my client probably the same as you do, Ian, as the boss, as the CEO of the business selling their home. And so, and that's what I think is really strange. And then it really irritates me when agents allow sellers to make those mistakes, because the agents just want to take easy street and get sellers signed up to really big, long, fat contracts. What's your view on that?
Long contracts, disagree with massively. I think that we've had in my current business and in my previous business, you know, we were 0-day contracts. You're hiding behind something, and I think you talk a lot about accountability, and you've got to hold accountability. You know, that if I can't do what I say I'm going to do, then we can shake hands and walk away. That's it. You know, you don't owe us anything, and you're not tied into us. Because on the times when it doesn't quite go to plan, which we've all had over the years, you'd much prefer that client just to say, you know what, Ian, you know, it's not worked. See you later. See you on the next one, whatever. Mm-hmm. Rather than you say, actually, John, you can't do that. You've got me for another 27 and a half days. And then for the next 27 and a half days, you're absolutely despising me. And I'm thinking, oh, I've got to ring John now, like, you know, because we've held him in for this 28 days. And historically, agents used to come to life, which was shocking in that last 28 days. Like, you know, you go and see someone, they say, right, I'm going to give notice to my agent. And then they'd ring you a few days later and say, oh, they've got 3 viewings this weekend. Because they'd been given notice, they started to ring around applicants. It's wild. But for me, it's all about 0-day contracts. It's like, you know, you do what you say you're going to do. And if you don't do it, then they can walk away and that's it.
Do you view what you say to a seller do you view it as a promise? Like you're promising to go to war for them, or is it watered down? Like whatever you say.
I do see it like that, to be honest with you, because I take it very personally when somebody instructs me. Just the same as when somebody doesn't. I take it personally when somebody instructs me, because you've sat down with them and you've got to know them, and you've got to understand what's driving them, what's motivating them. And sometimes it's good reason, sometimes it's not. And I do take it personally and take it seriously. And you want the very best outcome for that client. And like I say, even, you know, in any aspect of the business, it's all about getting that person to where they want to be. Because like I say, when you sit down with them in that lounge, there's not many other industries where people come into your house. You know, it's your personal private space, isn't it? You know, when people invite us in and you sit down with them and you're talking with them in the house, and often as you get to know them even in that first conversation, they're starting to tell you all the hopes and fears. And so, yeah, you form that sort of bond with them, and they're trusting you, aren't they? So, yeah, I do see it as take it personally, and I do see it as you are giving them your word that you're going to do the best thing by them.
Do you have a policy of, and you may not, but do you have a policy of taking on only so many properties at any one time?
Yes, in the sort of current format as self-employed personal estate agent, I think that you only have capacity because obviously one of the huge benefits to the seller of using somebody who is a personal self-employed estate agent, of course, is they've got that one point of contact. They've got that one person, as you say, will go to war for them. They've got that person who, when they ring them or they WhatsApp them, they get a message back straight away knowing where that case is up to. So that is the huge benefit. But the downside of that is it becomes watered down. If you take on too many properties, you lose that competitive advantage, and you can become like anyone who's collecting houses, really. So it's important to always make sure that you are managing your properties so that you can offer the same service to everyone all the time. And it's probably one of the most difficult skills, I think, to say to somebody, actually, no, can't take it on right now. And it's something that takes a lot of discipline to learn, because when you're in business, as you know, from setting up as a self-employed estate agent, you're looking at your bank account thinking like, I need to get some houses in here. I need to get some stuff sold. So it's a tough skill, isn't it?
Absolutely, especially when you may not get paid. Like, for example, just had an exchange of contracts today, and that was agreed about 4.5 months ago.
Right.
Now, the reason it was exchanging today was because everybody agreed, even the sellers, like, look, I can't actually move until January. So the completion date is on the 5th of January. Otherwise, that was a freehold house. There was no one purchased. That would have obviously gone through a lot quicker. But everyone sort of took their time. But the buyer wanted it for all the right reasons. Everyone knew what those reasons were. No one feared anything. The buyer was following the process. We slowed the process down. But that was okay, because it was like, to within an inch of its life, we knew that was going to sell. But from my perspective as an agent, bloody hell, that's like 6 months before I'm even getting paid. And so it does take a lot. Or for me, I say principles. And yeah, do I want to, win 4 instructions next week and then launch the market next January? And oh my God, yeah, brilliant. But what happens when I don't have capacity to be able to even think? Let alone, that's it then. Reputation done, finished, gone. Because now I don't have time to, make sure I'm properly servicing my clients. My clients now, probably the same as you, Ian, as well, they've become friends. I'm still keeping the WhatsApp groups going. I mean, it's just like, and just sharing nonsense between us that's got nothing to do with anything. But actually, do you know what? It's enjoyable. But that can only come from making sure that my capacity to really assist and be that concierge service that you were talking about earlier, which was short snippets of a property before it comes to market. But you can only send that to people if you truly know what it is they want, what their ideal description is of the perfect property, what has been the best property so far. How does that compare to the one that you've just taken on? All of those things. If you don't have time to have a long conversation with a buyer, then you ain't got time to truly service your client who's about to sell, right?
Absolutely. It is about managing that. Yeah, like you say, that principles, the discipline, the balancing act all the time. Absolutely.
Now, the market. What's your view on the market over the course of the next, as we're recording this right now, it's the end of 2025. But what's your view on the market in the next 6 to 12 months?
It's a really interesting one. As you talk about the market as a whole, I don't think it'd be too much to say that almost every single property is its own market. But I think in terms of the question, I think that we're coming out of, it's been a sort of a bit of a boom and bust cycle all within a space of the last few years, hasn't it? The COVID market obviously went absolutely bananas. We came out of that with a short, sharp bump, and interest rates went through the roof, and sort of consumer confidence and buyers sort of sat on the hands for a long time, and it was sort of scrapping for business and for sales. And then obviously election, and then more recently, obviously the budget, which, has affected the higher end of the market. But nonetheless, there was speculation about most of the market, really, wasn't there? Speculation about stamp duty, about this sort of so-called mansion tax. At some point was talked about offers over for properties over £500,000. So there have been people that have been sat on the hands for a while. So I feel like 2026, there's a bit of clear air ahead of us. Interest rates are coming down, and I feel like there's a great opportunity for agents in 2026 to really thrive, because I feel like we're on the upward trajectory as a market out of what's been a depressed market in the sort of probably 2022, 2023 and 24 really. So I feel that the market is on a bit of an upward trajectory, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a very interesting one, because of course I speak to so many people, so many sellers in various different parts of the country, and not just that, but also industry personalities. I was speaking to Rowan Waller, who is like a copywriter and like a ghostwriter for agents, and he was saying that like in places like Coventry, the market is still doing really quite well. However, if we look at prime central London, and not just prime central London, if we're talking going towards out and expanding, London's taken a huge hit. And historically, when London's not doing so well, the rest of the country doesn't do so well. But then we're at a fine balance between there are so many more people becoming self-employed that were actually pretty decent working in that independent on the high street or that corporate business, but they've decided actually, do you know what, they're going to do it for themselves. They were responsible for winning instructions, so on and so forth. And I think the more agents actually move away from that salaried role, the more, even if the market's not doing so well, I still think the sellers that use agents that truly know what they're doing, that don't have the luxury of selling contracts where they do need to get property sold, but they are willing to do it the right way, i.e., don't rush. I still think sellers are going to get their property sold in a bad market. So, but it sort of disguises what I think is happening all over the country. Will it stabilize where I'm selling property? I feel like we're not even at the bottom yet. And there are so many, especially flats, where the flats were bought, say, 6 years ago, but they're actually selling for less money now than they were then. Maybe that's just a flats thing. Maybe that's just an area thing. I don't know. The one thing I do know is, and tell me if I'm wrong, you said it perfectly when I met you at the dinner at Christmas, which was you can't, what was it said? You said you can't outmarket the price.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't really matter what market you're in, whether it's a poor market, whether it's a brilliant market, because in a brilliant market, I still see agents bullshitting sellers in a brilliant market in the hope that the weight of the amount of people on the market will end up catching up with the bullshit valuation they gave. And actually that didn't happen. Do you know what I mean? In a lot of instances. But where did you get that phrase from, that you can't outmarket the price?
I must have heard it on a podcast or somewhere. I'd love to claim it as an original Ian Wilkinson thought, but it's sadly not. I probably got it off a podcast like this. You know, I like to listen to a lot of industry podcasts, or somebody would have posted somewhere, and I just loved it because you're right. And I remember going to a talk in 2007 or 2008 around the crash, and the guy who was doing the talk got on stage and he said, "I can sell every single one of your houses, every single one of your listings right now today." And everyone in the crowd was like, "Oh, whatever." And he said, "I'll get my checkbook out and I'll give you 50 quid for any house that's on the market with you right now." And everyone obviously laughed, but his point was that everything sells at the right price. That was it. You know, in that market then, when the market just disappeared, his point, yeah, everything sells. It's a price thing. So I agree with you. I think that the market, whatever the market is next year, and you know, like I said, I think that there's huge opportunities for agents because it's just, you've just got to be on it with the pricing all the time, and it changes, doesn't it? You know, it changes area to area, house to house. You know, and for the purpose, I guess, of this conversation, we're talking about the core houses in your core area, like you mentioned, like the outlying houses. You know, the £1 million house in a £500,000 area. That's probably not maybe part of this conversation. We're talking about core area properties in core areas. You get that pricing strategy right, and houses do sell because there's always, you know, the standard births, marriages, divorces market. That's always there. There's just the people who are making a fancy it move, maybe sit on the hands in tougher markets. But yeah, I think there is a huge opportunity. You know, you get your price right and get a pricing strategy right. And again, there's a guy I know who's big into auctions, and he's always said, you know, the lower you start, the higher you end. You know, that's their little catchphrase, and it's sort of it's followed through into the mainstream market, hasn't it?
So prime example of that, if we take the last 3 properties, forget the one that I've exchanged on today. In fact, that one exchanged on today, guess what? I did a collab with another agent on that one who thinks exactly the same way you think, right? That property was on the market for over a year, multiple agencies, unable to sell. Marketing correct, pricing strategy correct, and agent correct. We actually sold it for its full asking price, where no other, and that wasn't by mistake. That wasn't by mistake, by the way, because it didn't just have one buyer that popped out from somewhere that had multiple viewers.
Yeah.
But if you take the ones where I've directly worked on myself, my last 3, for example, to your point, which was the lower you go, the higher you get. If you think Addlestone, that was bang on for the right money, but we achieved £12,500 over its asking price. Walton-on-Thames marketed that for 400 grand, which was quite a bit below, but we got 27,500 over its asking price. And the last one, I'm not going to tell you what's happened because that would be wrong of me because it's not actually exchanged contracts yet. But all I will say is 29 viewings, 18 offers. Yes, there were a couple of lowball offers in there as well, but everybody else enabled me to completely control the sale for my client. Yeah. I.e. the first buyer fell out of bed because they was not following the program that they agreed to. So I kicked them out of bed, but that was okay because we went straight to the next one. And we ended up getting a lot more money than provable market value. So I subscribe to the same ethos. You can put a property on for £1 and you would still find the right money because ultimately you're controlling your market. But just a very quick one for me, right? Quick short fire round, right? You got literally less than a sentence or maybe one word to answer these 5 questions, right? Are you ready?
Let's go.
One myth in a estate agency you'd scrap forever.
There's a myth that this race to the bottom myth on fees that all agents want to charge less. I don't think they do. I think they want to charge more. They just don't know how to do it.
Love that. Best advice for a new agent?
Tell everyone you know immediately. Social media, WhatsApp, everyone you bump into, everyone in the shop, at the school gates. Everyone, tell everyone, because your first instruction's in your phone. Your first instruction is the person that walks the dog past you every day. Tell everyone.
Best advice for a seller about to come to market?
Do your homework. There's so much information available now. There's, Trustpilot, Google reviews, social media. There's so much out there. So do your homework. It's not just a case of ringing the person that your mum and dad sold with 10 years ago. Do your homework and interview multiple agents and ask them the right questions. Be strategic in what you're asking them, how they got to their price, how they're going to launch your property, who does the viewings, when do the viewings happen. Due diligence.
Worst advice you hear in a estate agency?
The worst advice I hear in a estate agency, the worst advice is to listen to the client, which sounds a bit counterintuitive because, of course, you should listen to them in terms of what their hopes and fears are, but you should never listen to them in terms of what you should price it for or when it should go on the market.
One thing you wish every seller understood?
One thing I wish every seller understood is, I couldn't really put it any better than you put it before, about there's layers upon layers of different types of estate agents. I wish sellers understood more that estate agents are not all the same. We're not just all stick it on Rightmove, so why does it matter? I wish they had more insight into what we actually do and the different types of agency, which is happening, but slowly.